we don't recommend auto tuners, and this is a great example of why not. If you're going to have an auto tuner, you need to make sure that it's a really, really refined, robust system. There are some out there that we've sampled, used, have them on the dyno, and the job they do is pretty poor. Going to show you a graph of the job this auto tuner on this bike has done in terms of tuning it into AFR compared to a tune I did yesterday on a 2015 R1. And you look at the manual tune versus the auto tune, and they're all the same throttle positions because I tested the throttle positions on this because we did a tune assessment as part of this as well, and the tune's pretty rubbish. So you look at the job the auto tuner did compared to the job that we did yesterday, and it's drastically different. So much so that we're saying to Glenn getting this bike retuned is actually critical. Not recommended just for performance, it's critical. The bike shouldn't be running as lean as it is in areas. So again, some stuff out there you might want to put an auto tuner on, you think that might be the way. There is no substitute for having somebody really experienced to assist you with it. You can't just rely on what the auto tuner is telling you. Sometimes even some of the software and ECU tuning software, you see what the auto tuner and the numbers that it's telling you and go, great, I'm going to send that map to my bike. Some of the behind the scenes stuff in it isn't as robust as you may think. So if you don't have access to a dyno or a trusted dyno tuner that you can do, you need to be a little bit careful with the auto tuners. In fact, the stock map that these bikes have is better than the job the auto tuner's done. So a little bit disappointing to see it that bad. And as I've said plenty of times, there is no substitute for having a dyno. Even if you're going to go down the auto tune path, you should be testing that thing is doing what it should do on a dyno. When we have used auto tuners in the past and stuff like that, even when we did our World Superbike wildcard back in 2015, we made sure that we had enough wideband access bungs in the exhaust so that we could actually keep an eye on what that auto tuner was doing. And on that auto tune that we had back in 2015 on our World Superbike actually cost us getting a much better result in our World Superbike wildcard than it did. In the first race we got points, and then we had a DNF for a hole in radiator in race 2. But if it wasn't for the trouble that auto tuner gave us in the lead up testing and qualifying, we probably, instead of getting 14th in race 1, we probably would have gotten a top 10 in World Superbike. So if you don't need an auto tuner, don't use one. You're better off getting it tuned by somebody you trust on a dyno. Obviously, if you have access to us, we'd love you to get your bike tuned here, or get one of our loading maps. We do loading maps for a lot of different bikes. That's going to be better than throwing an auto tuner on it. And as I've said in the past too, auto tuners fail over time. So super important. Just a few little things on quick shifters, auto blips, and auto tuners. Hope that helps. Okay guys, we're back with the exact same R1. And if you ever needed convincing that having a bike properly tuned on a dyno is probably a bit better than just whacking on an auto tuner and not having it checked, this job gives you the ultimate example. So we've put our base map in it and then tuned the bike specifically, and the difference is phenomenal. Just have a look at the graph, over 10 horsepower improvement. In this case, unfortunately, the auto tuner on the bike was doing a poor job. There is a place for auto tuners in the world, definitely, but there isn't a place for auto tuners that are never checked and that never, check that they're robust and the job that they're doing. Liken it to a lot of modern aircraft can land themselves, right? But would you really want to be on an aeroplane coming into land at a major international airport with no pilot on it? What if something goes wrong? What if a sensor goes wrong? It's exactly like, well, it's an extreme case, similar concept to with tuning your motorcycle. Obviously, I've got a conflict of interest because we tune them here at Race Centre. We'd love you to bring your bike in and tune them. But even if you get a load-in map from a reputable source, that's a much better option than just leaving the auto tuner to its own devices. If you're going to use the auto tuner, especially on a racetrack, just make sure you're monitoring it, keeping an eye on it. And really, while the auto tuner is great, the person using it and working with it should have a decent amount of experience in tuning, because if you don't, you eventually will get caught out. But this is a great example. Look at the power difference. This bike was running so lean at 100% throttle in the higher RPM that was actually, it was bordering on, well, it definitely was dangerous for the motor, and you can see that's why it's has such a horsepower deficit. When we've tuned it, chucked the fuel in that it's needed, it's happy, making power that it should make. So, and the power it makes is exactly what we'd expect from one of these bikes. So, really great example of why having your bike checked properly on a dyno is really, really important. As I've said before as well, we have, or just if you're getting a loading map, make sure you're getting it from somewhere that you know they've done their homework and their research, so that when you're putting that in, you're getting a really good tune. The thing, if you're ever unsure, if you do get a loading map or you do put an auto tuner on or that type of thing and you're unsure if it's doing a good job, you'll feel it. If it doesn't feel as good as it did with, before the auto tuner went on or before the loading map, then it's probably not as good, right? So really important to know that. But yeah, really great example, and let's go make some noise.